Now then, welcome to another episode of the podcast. This time I'm talking to Toni Stefaniuk. Toni's a watercolourist from Lincoln, who's been doing watercolours now for 7 years, and before that she taught law to students in sixth form. We talk about those two things. We talk about drawing, sketching. She goes to a club at the Cardinal's Hat. We talk about that. Where she sells her paintings at Hemswell Antiques, different subjects to paint and how she finds, which ones are tricky, which ones are easy. All sorts of stuff really. So if you're ready, let's go.
Did you grow up in Lincoln then?
Yeah, Lincoln, born and bred, never been far away. In fact, when I went to university, I only went as far as Nottingham.
All right, okay.
I basically drew up a short list of all the universities that were closest to home.
Yeah, you wanted to be close.
Well, I'd got horse and boyfriend in Lincoln, so I couldn't be separated from either.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And what did you do at university?
At university, I did law.
Oh, okay.
And that's what I started out doing. I started out at Nottingham Uni. Yeah. Then went to Nottingham Trent to do my solicitor's finals, then came back, did my, what we used to call in those days, article clerkship in Lincoln, then worked as a young solicitor in Lincoln.
Yeah.
Never really intended doing anything else, but when I was off on maternity leave with my first baby, the headmaster of the grammar school at Gainsborough just happened to ring me up out of the blue and said, "You've done some work from us in the past. We like what you did. We're looking for somebody to come and teach A-level law.
Right,
Do you fancy doing that?"
Oh, so you're going to be teaching it, okay.
Yeah. And so I said, "Oh, yeah, I'll give it a go." I don't know why I said yes, I'll give it a go, but I did.
Yeah.
And I was there over 20 years.
Really? Teaching law, okay.
Yeah. Started out with 6 pupils in the lower 6.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the next year there was a new intake into the lower 6, and I'd got those 6 to take through to the upper 6. And then it just grew and grew to the extent that in the end I had to take on a part-timer as well because it was so popular. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy teaching
I
students?
Absolutely loved it. I loved everything to do with it apart from the admin.
Yeah.
And in the end...
I mean, things like you had to do after the lessons and things like that?
Yeah, and it gradually, because when did I start teaching? I started teaching in the early 90s. And so I came into it at the stage when it wasn't massively regulated. I mean, my interview consisted of me meeting the head in his office and him saying, "Oh, great that you could come. What days could you fit us in?" And I said, "Well, it doesn't really matter because I'm on maternity leave." He said, "Oh, right then. I'll fix you up a timetable. Here's the exam board's address. You can write off and get the specification and some past papers."
Really, yeah.
And that was it. That was the interview.
Yeah, simple as that,
yeah. And then I'd been there, I think, probably about 3 months before anybody even came to watch me teach.
Really?
So, yeah, it was...
So you just sort of... let loose on the
job.
Just
bumbling along. And then I got more and more into it and loved it more and more. But I was then in the period when it got more and more regulated. Yeah. And I was also in it, I mean, youngsters of today won't realise, but obviously we had never done anything on computer at all. I mean, when I started, I used to type out notes for the students and then have them done on a bander machine or something.
Right, okay.
Gradually it got to photocopies. Then I got an electric typewriter.
Fancy.
And then, eventually onto computers and word processing. So there was all that to learn as well as everything else. And then, of course, you got PowerPoint and also... So you're taking all that on board as well as the teaching. That was fine. I could cope with that. But it got more and more... I don't want to say accountable, because you should be accountable, but there was far more checking up. I mean, we were lucky. Our department was really, really successful, but we still had to go through the same hoops as everybody else, and you were always having to prove. I'd say, well, just look at my exam results. Do I really have to do a report saying, you know, all these things when we've probably got the best results in the school? Yes, you just still have to do it, and you had to write your exam report. And I used to think, but I just want to teach. I just want to be in the classroom teaching.
So it just got more and more, and you eventually just kind of got sick of it.
Yeah,
really.
and then I made the mistake. They took me on as an associate deputy head, and that was less teaching, even more admin. And I'm not very good at. I'm really not good at admin. Was it a bit more managerial? It was a bit more managerial. I'm not a good manager. I'm not good at admin, and eventually, I just thought, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I'd had some health problems. My mother had died. When she died, or before she died, she sort of was sitting one day and she said, well, I've not had a bad life. And I thought, oh, that's awful, to die and to be saying I've not had a bad life. I want to be able to say, I've had a great life. And I'm getting to the stage now where teaching is all-consuming and I'm exhausted all the time. And I'm not enjoying it as much because I'm not doing as much teaching. So it's time to go.
Time to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
except I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I just thought, no, time to go.
Did you leave that without any sort of plan then? Really?
I left that without any plan.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I suppose that gives you a bit of a kick to go and do something anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I thought I would have a few months deciding what I was going to do, and I actually started a counselling course because I thought I'd quite like to be a counsellor. People had always said that I was good at advising them, and I never thought I was. I always thought, I just don't know what to say, but people used to say, oh, you're a really good listener, you should be a counsellor. So in the end I thought, okay, I'll do a course, see if they'll teach me what to say. But what you find out on a counselling course is that no, you don't get taught what to say. On a counselling course, what you learn to do is listen and let other people reach their own conclusions about what they ought to do. It's not for you to suggest things.
Okay. And so you sort of let them talk themselves around to it, and you just kind of listen.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And the whole course was fascinating. But at the time that I wasn't doing the sort of coursework for the counselling course, I was just sitting listening to Radio 4 because I'm was a Radio 4 addict.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I could just sit and do this all day, but I can't possibly do that. I will feel too guilty. I cannot sit and listen to the radio all day. I need to be doing something. What can I do? And I thought, well, I don't knit. I can crochet, but I don't like it. I can embroider, but it's a bit of a faff. I'll try painting.
Oh, really?
I'd never painted.
That was one of the main questions, really, like where it started.
Yeah,
so it just
never painted. Started out of
for
nowhere. Yeah, just wanting something to do while I was listening to the radio. And so I asked my two daughters if they would get me a little watercolour set. I mean, I didn't know the difference between watercolour, oils, whatever, but I had seen some watercolours and thought, oh, I like the effect of that. I'll start with watercolour. And I thought it would be the easiest, which I now discover everybody says, oh no, watercolours are the hardest.
Yeah, because it always, doesn't it, like move around the page quite a lot as you go?
It's hard to control, and people say you can't correct it, but you actually can, but it's probably harder to correct than anything else.
Yeah.
And so I just started painting.
How long ago was that then that you started doing that?
That was 7 years, I think.
7 years ago?
7 years ago.
Oh, right, so it's not that long,
no,
really.
No, it's not.
And have you not been able to sort of drop it since then?
Not been able to stop since then. Yeah. I paint nearly every day, and if I'm not painting, I get a bit twitchy.
Yeah.
And Steve always says when we used to go out for drives at the weekend, and he often used to just look across at me and say, "What are you thinking about?" And it always used to be work, because I always used to be thinking about what am I teaching next week? Is it prepared? Have I done that? Whatever. And now he'll look across at me and say, "What are you thinking about?" And I say, "Painting."
Yeah, you're looking at things out the window.
But I'm a lot less stressed than I used to be. Yeah. So you just look at everything in a completely different way. Yeah. So I now understand clouds. I mean, before you just look and see clouds. Now you think, oh yeah, actually there's a perspective to them, and there's a solidity to them at the bottom. And as they go, actually the sky is a dome, and so the bit above you, you are looking up at the clouds, so you're seeing the bottom of them. And then as they go into the distance, they're getting further away, so they're getting smaller and flatter. And
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, and you just
changes your perspective, doesn't it?
Absolutely changes it, and you're looking at colours and thinking, oh, how would I get that colour? And
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, really, because of what I do.
You're a graphic designer, aren't you?
Well, I'm actually product designer. I do graphics and stuff, but yeah, like what mostly what I do is like motorcycle accessories.
Yeah,
and just like understanding the shapes of things, like how they're put together. So like many mudguard shapes, for example, are like multiple spheres put together and then chopped and changed. And it like you say, once you get used to that, you start to look at things and go, I can see how that works.
Yeah. And I'm not as good as that. I can't. I'm still not very good at seeing how things work, but I'm getting better at seeing shapes. And so there's the old thing that if you're struggling to draw something, it's probably because you are probably trying to draw an object. So you're thinking, I've got to draw a bike or I've got to draw a face. Whereas what you should be doing is thinking, right, well, there's a circle there, there's a triangle there, there's a square. And like, just constructing it.
Disconstructing it.
Yeah.
I suppose that's it, really, isn't it? That is basically the same thing, I suppose, in painting, really.
Yeah.
It's interesting stuff. I used to love drawing when I was younger, but I just kind of stopped doing it.
Yeah, I did a bit, but not a lot. And the only thing I did do, there was a shop in Lincoln. I don't know whether you know it because I don't know how long you've been in Lincoln. A shop called Ruddock's.
Yeah, isn't it the place that's gone now?
It has gone now, but it was there when I was a child.
Yeah.
And I bought a paint by numbers oil painting kit.
Yeah.
And I used to be in the conservatory on Donington Road in Lincoln, and I painted this squirrel, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. It was done paint by numbers, but it was still an oil painting, and you used the terps and the linseed oil and God knows what else. Yeah. And I thought it was fantastic, and my dad thought it was amazing, and so he showed it to a friend of his who was a graphic designer, who just said, well, it's just paint by numbers, isn't it? And that was it. I just put it to one side and didn't paint again.
Yeah. I suppose to some people that's like it's like the bottom rung of the ladder, isn't it? Painting.
Yeah.
my girlfriend loves doing paint by numbers.
Yeah.
But maybe one day she'll do some like.
Yeah, well, she might.
She might end up.
Or
painting.
she might just carry on enjoying paint by numbers.
Yeah, she does seem to like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's a big thing at the moment, isn't there, with doodling and all the little colouring in books that you can buy where you just colour in.
She likes to do crochet as well.
Things
like that. She finds that nice and therapeutic. And I suppose that's one of the main things about painting, isn't it? It's kind of therapy, really. Like.
It is, but that's what everybody says. Oh, it must be so relaxing. And in some ways it is, because it takes your mind away from whatever other background noise you've got that you're thinking about. In fact, talking about that, I got into it because I wanted to be able to listen to the radio. I put the radio on now. Sometimes when I go into the studio, I don't always remember. And I get to the end of a programme and think, I haven't heard a word of that. Yeah. Because you're just so focused on the painting.
It's just babble in the background.
It is. And with it being watercolour as well, you're just concentrating all the time because it's all about timing. And when is the paper wet enough to actually put that colour in? Or is it dry enough yet for me to put that colour in? And, you're just focused all the time.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of fun, actually. Yeah.
Oh, it is.
I'd like to have a go at it at some point.
Yeah.
So what's the relationship between like drawing and painting for you? Like, do you want to get the drawing out as quick as possible so you can start painting?
Yeah, I think I was initially motivated by colour, and it's colour that really excites me.
Yeah.
And I'd never been taught to draw, and so I didn't really know how to draw. I've got a few books now, but you can't really teach somebody to draw by book. You've just got to learn by doing. So I do try to draw something every day. So even if I'm sitting watching TV, I'll perhaps try and sketch somebody that's on the TV, or I'll draw the cupboard under the TV or the chair in the corner, just to get my hand in. But I'm not brilliant at drawing, but I'm still getting better. Yeah. And I go to a portraits group on a Monday night, which is brilliant. It started off with Phil Bowman that has the gallery at St Martin's. He used to do it in the little church hall,
Yeah.
And we would just go on a Monday night. There'd always be a model there.
Yeah.
He then stopped doing that about 6 months ago, I think. But Ellie, who used to come to the classes, she's taken it on, and we go to the Cardinal's Hat on a Monday night.
Oh, yeah. I like that pub. It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, there's a little function room upstairs that we take over on a Monday night, and we just have 2 hours drawing a model. And just over the past, I don't know, probably I would say a year or less than a year, I've got so much better at measuring and drawing.
Yeah.
So that now I used to just focus on the face, but the last 3 or 4 weeks, I think I've been doing full body, and I've actually looked at them and thought, they're just about in proportion. And Ellie's very good as well. She'll come around and say, you might want to just measure that bit again.
Yeah. So if you start in one point and you end up at the other end and you realise it's not
well,
right, if you don't.
I paint my husband, and he'll lie out on the settee or on the bed or something.
Yeah.
And I start, and it doesn't matter how carefully I plan, I always end up with his feet off the end of the page. And he's got very large feet, and they just disappear off. And I think,
that's
for goodness sake, I've planned this, I've measured it, I've put a mark where his feet are going to be. There's his head, everything's going to fit. And then I get to the end and think, no, I've missed his feet again.
Yeah. I spoke to a guy probably a month or 2 ago now, who does a lot of sketching and stuff, and he was saying that like drawing people is still one of the hardest things, and that's the thing he's most like.
Yeah, but again, I bet that's because he's trying to draw people.
Yeah.
And if he just drew shapes.
Yeah. And I think it's like, he says that like the way he challenges himself is he tries to like draw people in quite awkward positions and things.
Yeah.
And like he says it's amazing how like how much like I suppose it's like diversity there is in the way it can look, and easy to get wrong.
Yeah,
especially.
I mean, foreshortening is just the best. Foreshortening is amazing.
What's that?
That's where if the bit of the person that's nearest to you is so much bigger and it's out of proportion, you would think, well, an arm can't be that big compared to the size of a head, but actually, yes, it can be if it's that much nearer to you.
Yeah.
And so you can get some really good effects with that, and that's something that I've not really explored yet. So the lady I paint with on a Friday, going back to Ruddocks, started out with my little squirrel at Ruddocks. Many years later, once I'd started to paint in watercolour, there was a watercolour course at Ruddocks.
Yeah.
And it was just, I don't know, on a Thursday afternoon or something, we'd go down, and it was run by a woman from Donington called Gillian Beale. This is
the person that you display your paint.
Yeah, that's right. And I'd been going to it for, I think, about 6 weeks when suddenly the news came that Ruddocks was closing. And we were all like, oh, no. But Jill said, well, anybody that's interested, come out to my studio on a Friday morning and we'll carry on there. And I think 2 of us did. A lot of others didn't, or only came once or twice, but I've carried on going. Yeah. And that's how I've ended up in such a lucky position of being able to sell my work, because she has the gallery at Hemswell in the restaurant, and she would just say, well, look, if there's anything you paint when you're with me that I like, I'll take and I'll put it up and see if it sells. And gradually she's just taken more and more.
Great.
And so now I'm always in a panic thinking, Jill must need some more paintings, got to get some more paintings done.
Got to get stock in.
Yeah. And I go and I think, actually, I didn't need to worry, because I suppose the earlier stuff doesn't sell as fast, but the recent stuff tends to. I mean, it'll sometimes sell on Instagram even before we've got it to Thameswell, which always really irritates Gillian.
Does it?
Yeah,
she didn't like it when I bought it from
No, she won't.
Direct from you.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing
they
now.
jump in the gun. But, if people have seen it, I can't say, no, you can't have it.
It's interesting how, like, the way it's changed quite a lot, because now you can go direct to people a lot easier, can't you?
Yeah.
And, like, people use things like Patreon and things like that.
Yeah.
Where they get,
That's right. But because we've got this, I mean, it's fantastic. There are so many better painters than me that have got nowhere to display their work. And they have to organise exhibitions. I mean, I was reading a post from Heather Dixon, who used to be in Lincoln. She was actually a friend of my sister's, and I hadn't realised she is now an artist in Yorkshire. And she was saying this morning on Instagram what a faff it is. Always, you're forever packing your paintings up organising an exhibition, taking them to hanging them, going back to check, moving them about, then taking them home again, realising none have sold, and then having to organise another one. And I just take my paintings to Jill.
Yeah,
and she just
got
takes
like a
them to Hen as
in.
well. And she's brilliant. The displays she does there are just amazing.
I must have seen some, because I've been around there a few times with my
Yeah,
dad.
well,
It's a nice place.
it's just in the restaurant, and she just is responsible for keeping the restaurant looking nice. And most of the paintings there are mine, because there's mine, and then there's Lai, who I paint with on a Friday, Sue, and a few others. She takes their paintings and on the wall. And,
wow, how many do you think she's got of yours then at the moment?
God, I wouldn't like to say. As I say, a lot of them are slightly earlier ones, because the ones that I do now tend to sell fairly quickly. But there must be, I would think, probably 30, 40.
Yeah. And how many have you got that are just like knocking about?
I have very few.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I tend to just take them to Jill, and she'll either buy them herself and have them made into greetings card, or she takes them to him as well.
Some people hang on to loads, don't they?
Yeah,
and never do anything with them.
Yeah, I don't. They go.
Nice.
My
That's cool.
daughter in LA has got probably 4 or 5, and my other daughter has got 3, maybe 4. But I'm looking after them at the moment because she's in London, and whenever the flat she's in at the moment, whenever she hangs anything on the wall, it falls off.
Yeah.
Even though she's using command strips, which she's
I hate
always
those.
used, but there must be something in the paint.
Yeah, some
That
walls don't work the same.
So that mine have come home and they're hanging on the wall in the studio, and I quite like them, and I don't really want to give them back ever. But because Steve's always saying, you're going to be sorry, one day, because you just let them all go.
Yeah, well.
And even ones that I really like. Well, yeah, we've got a lot of pictures, and we put them up and we like them, and quite a lot of them were my mum's or...
Yeah.
So I've not got room to put any of mine up.
Yeah.
Plus, I'd always be looking at them and thinking, oh, I wish I'd just done that. And, oh, that could have been a bit better.
Yeah, criticising them.
Yeah.
No, it's nice to know that other people have got them.
It's amazing. And because we don't sell them, I mean, yours was quite a big one, wasn't it? But there are smaller ones that we charge, I think for the smallest, we charge about £35-38, and they're original paintings. Yeah. And to think that somebody can go and buy that and then put it on the wall and enjoy it, it's just
more
fantastic.
Special, isn't it?
It is.
It's more special to me, even before I knew you, just because it's just like someone local, and it's a thing that that I recognise. And what I liked about it was the way you'd painted the cathedral, and you'd kind of left it quite basic, and I really liked that for some reason. Yeah, because all the pictures you see of the cathedral are very
really
detailed.
No, I just like, I suppose because I see it a lot, because I walk past it nearly every day. It's just constantly there, and I don't always look at it in detail.
Yeah, you can do it with your eyes closed anyway. So
it's just that impression that it's there. Yeah. And it's
Were you interested in? Did you like art on the walls and around your house before you started painting then?
I did, and I've always sort of known what I like and known what I don't like, but I wouldn't say that I've got a great eye.
No.
My husband he's got a much better eye, I think, than I have, and I keep telling him he ought to start painting.
How do you mean, in what way?
So in terms of designing a room, or deciding, I mean, we've got some Dickens prints up on the stairs, and I think there are 18 of them. And he decided on the layout, and it's just brilliant. And I think I would.
I've seen them. As I walk past.
I thought I would never have thought to put them that way, but he can just do it. But he was a draftsman.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, started out as a draftsman in the days before it was all computerised. So he was at Ruston Gas Turbines. Well, started out, I think, as a draftsman at Ruston Bucyrus, then Ruston Gas Turbines. And so it's just drawing turbines.
Big drawing board.
Massive drawing board, yeah. And he's still so fast at converting inches into millimetres and everything else. He can do it, without
I suppose he
thinking
lived
about it.
through it, so he has to get used to doing that. I'm awful at that. Because obviously everything's millimetres now, so it's just like...
No, he lived through it. Yeah, and of course, because they were designing turbines that were going on the continent as well, so he was always doing it.
been creative, have you? So you did start
No.
7 years ago. So that's kind of been answered.
Yeah.
What's the most sort of, what subjects are you sort of like most comfortable painting?
That's an interesting question, because what I paint most often are Lincoln scenes, but I wouldn't say I'm the most comfortable painting them because they're blooming hard.
Yeah, so
because of
like architecture.
Architecture, so perspective and and that sort of thing. I'm more comfortable probably painting a landscape, a landscape in the sense of rural rather than city.
Yeah. But there's more room for error, isn't there, when you're doing that kind of thing?
Yeah. But I have started now putting more people in as well. So I suppose it's going to the painting in a pub on a Monday night.
Yeah.
I'm getting more and more confident about painting people. And so now I'm tending to put more people in, which is always nice because sometimes somebody will recognise themselves if they happen to see it on Instagram.
That's nice.
Yeah, it is. But then if you put more than one person in and they all see it, you get more than one wanting the painting, which is then really awkward.
Yeah, but that is awkward. Yeah,
Yeah.
to paint another one.
Yeah. And with watercolour, you can never paint it the same again because the paint will do what it wants to do.
Yeah.
But I mean, I paint all sorts. I love painting flowers, but that in itself is quite an art, and that is hard.
Yeah.
And there's a surprising amount of form in a flower, and you've got to get it all in, and it's very easy not to realise how dark the darks are on a flower, because you just think flowers, airy fairy, delicate little things, but actually the shadows and whatnot are really dark sometimes. So it's quite hard to make yourself go dark enough. And that is a thing with watercolour as well. It's a particular challenge. Watercolours have always had this reputation of being very wishy-washy.
Yeah, quite pale.
And it's because, they're watercolours, and so people add a lot of water to them, whereas sometimes you don't want water.
No.
You need to be using nearly neat paint.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to realise that. And also, you get so, as a child, when you paint, when you're doing it at school with poster paints and all sorts of things, you would dip your brush in the water, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And then put it in the paint. And so you're in this habit of going into the water and then into paint. With watercolour, if you keep going into your water and then into your paint, you're just diluting the paint all the time.
All the time, yeah.
All the time. So it just gets
Just be very selective
wetter and
about
wetter.
it.
So you have to clean the brush, then dry it off, then go into your already mixed pool of paint. And you have to make sure you've mixed enough of a pool of paint before you start. Otherwise, you suddenly run out and you think, oh my God, how am I going to get that colour again? And you're stuck. So, yeah.
Do you ever wish that you started doing it earlier?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think, why didn't I do this sort of thing?
Yeah. Oh, I wish I had. But then I think no, because actually it's quite a nice excuse.
Yeah.
It's always nice to have an excuse. I know when I was doing my solicitors finals at Trent Poly, and they were, at that time, they were known as the toughest exams known to man.
Yeah.
And you studied for a year solid, and then you did, I think it was 6 hours of exams a day for 3 days. Or was it 9 hours? I can't remember, but it was really, really tough.
Yeah.
And the failure rate was phenomenal. I got glandular fever, I think partway through the second term, and had nearly the rest of that term off. And everybody was saying, oh, don't do the exams, don't do. I said, no, I'll just do them, because if I fail, it's because I had glandular fever. And I did. Unfortunately, I passed. But everybody else was so stressed. And I was just, no, it's okay. No, if I fail, it's because I had glandular fever.
Gave you an out. Yeah, that was cool.
So it's the same with watercolour, really.
Yeah. Did you enjoy school then? Were you?
I was a bit of a swot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
But I didn't. Well, I say I was. I didn't really work. I could have worked harder.
You did what you needed to do.
Yeah, I did what I needed to do, and I never got into proper reading. That, as a child, I always read a lot, and I read very fast, and I didn't necessarily take a lot in.
Yeah, my mum used to say she used to do that.
Yeah, and so when it got to sixth form, and you're supposed to be, reading your history, hardcore history books.
Yeah.
I'd think, and I'd want to read it as fast as I read every other book, and so I'd get frustrated. You can't, and so I didn't do all the background reading I was supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah, reading's a funny one. It's strange for me. At the moment, I'm like into it, but I've always complained that like I just can't. I think it's just a generational thing. Like, people just aren't as interested in it.
Yeah.
And like, it's so many distractions from it.
Yeah.
And it's just, but when I get into it, it's like the best thing ever, because your imagination is basically the best way of taking the information in, because you sort of do your own thing to it.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and I'd
like
rather read it in a book than watch it on TV always. Yeah. Even though I do watch TV, but yeah, I'd always rather read a book. So, what's the last book you read?
The last one I read was one about evolution. It was by Nick Lane, he's called, and it's the 10 great inventions of evolution. So it goes through like multicellular life, and then photosynthesis and eyes, stereo vision and all sorts of stuff. And like you say, like if you go too fast,
I was going to say, because
I was just like,
I hardly ever read factual books. It's always fiction. And it's the same. I buy art books, so I'll get books about how to paint watercolour by artists that I really like, and I just want to race through the text, and I just want to look at the pictures, and I have to make myself go back and read the text. But most of the time I'm reading it, I'm thinking, you could have said that in 3 sentences and you've said it in 30. And I used to find that with counselling as well. You have never read such waffle as you'll read in counselling textbooks and books about psychology. Honestly.
Yeah, endless.
And you just think, for goodness sake, you could just condense it, just summarise it.
Yeah, people who like professions like that where it's very wordy. They sort of. My mum's very much like that. She writes a lot. She works with us actually at the family business, and she lives in France, but she sends a lot of like messages and things to us. And she's a person who writes a lot, and I'm the opposite. I like to sort of get it down in the smallest amount.
So is she your sort of copywriter effectively then?
Yeah, I mean, well, for example, when I do like fitting instructions for products, I tend to just write there's probably like half a page of text. And I'll tend to just send it to her for her to check it over and reword things and bits like that. But it's a skill, isn't it? You've got to be interested in linguistics, I suppose, and language to be able to do it. So
well, because my younger daughter is a copywriter, and everybody always says, "Why are you a copywriter?" When you were at school, you had this fantastic imagination, and we were all sure you were going to be a writer. And she used to tell all the kids, because she went to boarding school, and she used to tell all the kids their bedtime stories. She just used to make them up. They used to be begging her for all these stories, and now they say, Why are you a copywriter? She says, because I like the discipline of it. She loves being told, right, you've got to write about this in this style, and you can only do 100 words.
Yeah.
And she said it's just that discipline.
Like the limitations of it.
Yeah, and the challenge. Yeah.
Is this the daughter that lives in America then?
No, she's in London.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the American daughter is a lawyer, even though I tried to tell her not to be.
Ended up doing it as well.
You'll sell your soul. Yeah. And she did for a bit, but she's not quite so much anymore. She's gone into, rather than working for a firm of lawyers, she works for a firm of investment capitalists or something along those lines, and so she works more reasonable hours now. So,
all the different jobs that people have, eh?
Yeah.
How specialised they are. That's the interesting thing about doing this, actually, and speaking to people. It's just like, even like trying to understand someone's job like that and trying to get down into like the detail of it. It's still hard to understand like exactly what they get up to day to day. Yeah. But it's mad. It's mad how like varied it is. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say, why do you prefer to work with watercolours? But you just randomly chose that.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about changing that? Or
no, I think because it's going to take me the rest of my life to learn properly how to use them, so I can't let time get in the way of my time with those.
So you've got to stick to it and get better at it.
Got to stick to it, get better at it. Yeah, finally master it. I'll get there.
Do you find like going to like workshops and stuff is like a good way of learning new things? Or?
It is. I'm starting to go to fewer now, I think. Yeah. And I've always been quite selective about which ones I go to, in that I will make sure that I like the artist's work before I go on the course. Because not everybody does that, which absolutely amazes me. But I go on some really good courses at a place in Norfolk called Big Sky Arts, and they have really good tutors. And there's one in particular who makes it very plain on his description of the course. This is a plein air course, which means we're going outside painting.
Yeah.
Bring suitable footwear, stuff for wet weather. We'll be covering quite rough terrain and this, that, and the other. And I got there one week for 1 week, and I met him before because I'd been on one before, and he met me in the car park and he said, Tony, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I said, why? What's the matter? He said, well, I've got all the whole week planned. I know where we're going. There are 3 people over 90 and 2 of them are on sticks.
Okay, might be a bit awkward.
And when obviously they ended up staying in the studio quite a lot of the time because they just couldn't manage the sort of stuff that we were doing. And towards the end of the holiday, they said to me, well, okay, so how do you choose which holiday you want to come on then? And I said, well, I'll look and see who's tutoring it.
Yeah.
And think, oh yeah, I like their work, and then I'll read a bit about them, and if I like them and like the way they teach or whatever, then They said, oh, we just thought Norfolk would be a nice place to go and paint.
Yeah.
And they hadn't even looked or read the course description or anything.
Just the place. Yeah.
Just the place. Yeah. So no, I do find them useful.
Yeah.
And I approach them in a slightly different way now, in that I used to go, and for the week or however long the course was, I would follow exactly what that instructor did. And so I would try and reproduce what they were doing. Yeah. And I would think, well, what I'll do is I'll do that, and then I'll maybe then carry some of those things over into my paintings.
Yeah. And now do you find that you're
that seemed to work. Now I do that a bit less, and I suppose I'm just trying to think, was it the last course I went on? It probably was with a sort of world-renowned watercolour painter.
Yeah.
And I found that I wasn't painting how he painted, because I liked how he painted more when he was younger. I like what he does now less. I found that a lot of male watercolour painters at the moment they're all doing the same thing, and it's all very grey and has a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
And water, wet roads with reflections of headlights.
It's quite popular, actually, isn't it? I've seen a lot of that.
Yeah, it is. And he was doing quite a lot of this stuff, and even his townscapes were often quite grey.
Yeah.
I don't really want to do that. And actually, I think it might not be the painting you bought. It might be one I did before I went on the course. Was one where this chap that I was with had done a painting of a church in posh place in Norfolk, beginning with a B.
I don't know.
It'll come to me. And the church was backlit, and so it was really dark, and the trees were really dark, and then there was grass and a bright umbrella.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh well, I could do the cathedral like that. And then I thought, I don't really want to.
No.
I want the colour. I've got to have the colour in it. And so
your style.
Now I'm going to do. And actually, I think it was what I did was I remembered your painting that I'd done.
Yeah.
And thought, right, I'm going to do that one again, using some of the techniques that I've learnt on this course, but with my colours, not with the darkness. Yeah. And so I did it again and liked it much more.
I suppose the more you do it, then the better you get at it.
Yeah.
You kind of want to put your own spin on it.
Yeah. And I do. I mean, when I take paintings to Doddington on a Friday, occasionally some of the women I paint with will say, oh, that's not your normal style. And I think, oh, it's nice to know that I've got a normal style.
Yeah.
Because when you first start painting, you just copy everything, and you don't know what your style is, but gradually you just paint in the way you come to paint.
Yeah. I think your stuff's very coherent. Yeah. I think it's quite interesting somehow sometimes when you like I said, what I liked about the one I bought is like how you dial it back sometimes. Yeah. On the detail. I went right down on your stuff the other day, and I saw like there's some of the I think it was probably a few years ago of one of the cathedral that he'd done. That was he had it on a postcard as well.
Yeah.
It was a very like detailed version.
Yeah.
It's quite different to what you normally do now.
Yeah, that was pen and ink that was when I'd very first started, yeah.
I was thinking the other day, because obviously you've just been to Portugal and I've just been, and I was thinking it's really, when you go to a new place, it's like really cool to experience like the way the different architecture is, and I was thinking that must be quite exciting when you
you almost need to take a completely different set of colours with you.
You got prepared.
And I find that when I go to Los Angeles in particular, if I try and paint at my daughter's, and I used to do quite a lot of painting when I was there because she'd just had babies, and so I used to go out for 3-4 weeks at a time and help look after the babies, and then when they were in bed I would paint. And I think need different colours, which I mean is a bit of a cop out, because actually if you've got your basic set of colours you should be able to mix any colours from the basic colours that you've got, but particularly if you're just doing quick things outside, it's easier if you've got some sort of colours that are more appropriate, that you don't have to spend a lot of time mixing. And you do for LA, you need a different colour palette.
Are you quite like particular about the all your sort of paint brushes and paper and things, or are you a little bit more relaxed about it? How do you?
Particular in what way?
Like, do you like specific types of paper and specific types?
Like you do. With paper, you find, because watercolour is so awkward. You need to be familiar with your paper, so you know how it's going to react to a certain amount of water and a certain amount of dryness. So I tend to stick to the same sort of watercolour paper. And it's expensive, but you have to take the view, well, lots of people go out and spend money on a cup of coffee. Instead, I'll have 2 sheets of watercolour paper, thank you. That's it.
Make something that's going to last as well.
And a lot of people as well are a bit, they say, oh, but you've got this sheet of watercolour paper and you don't want to spoil it. And I just think, just go for it. But there is always that.
You don't want to do something that you might not be happy with, and then you've wasted it.
And there is always that thing before you start a painting. It is nerve-wracking. You do have to get over that. I'm going to start, and I do find that I prevaricate some days, and I'll get back from shopping in the morning, and I think, right, time to go and paint, and then I think, I'll just do the crossword, I'll just tidy that, or and I know it's or I'll go on Instagram and start looking at what other people are doing, which is a complete no, don't, because all you're looking at is thinking, oh, they're better than me, oh, that's much nicer than I can, I can never do that. And you just have to no, just go and paint. And you have to make yourself go and start, and then once you get started, that's it, you can't stop.
It's quite tricky looking at other people's work sometimes.
It is.
It's nice, like you say, it's nice not to sometimes, because then you don't have to, you're not thinking about it, and sometimes you can kind of like replicate it by accident just because you saw it earlier. And you've got to stay original. But then there are some people that, for instance, take amazing photos, particularly around Lincoln, and if you just approach them, they're generally really happy. Just say, by all means, go and paint it. Use that to paint from. So how do you find, like, would you prefer to paint with something, what's it called, in plein air?
On plein air.
French phrase.
Is it
better to do that?
Oh, it's fantastic. I don't do it often enough because I'm too lazy. Because
what effort, isn't it?
What I need to do really is get a kit sorted that is always there in the car. But because watercolour stuff is expensive, you tend not to duplicate things. And I ought to. But I've done quite a lot on plein air, and there's always something about them that's better than the ones in the studio. And I can remember doing one down on Carhome Road, looking across the West Common up to the cathedral, and I was under some trees, and while I was painting, all these bits of stuff were dropping out of the trees into my palette and onto the painting, and I was finding bits of greenery and twigs and all sorts in all my painting stuff for days afterwards, and it was so nice to look back on it and think, well, that's because I was painting outdoors. And I've done a few on Burton Top, looking out across the Trent Valley, because that's one of my favourite views. Not many people appreciate it because they don't like the cooling towers, but I've always really liked cooling towers. And I used to drive that way to work because I used to live in Lincoln and work in Gainsborough. So I used to drive there early in the morning, so I used to get the sunrise, and then I'd come back and get sunset in winter. Oh, it's fabulous.
Yeah, I like that. I used that for some of my photography A-level, some of that photos from that landscape. It is a nice landscape. I know what you mean. It's just so flat. It's obviously characteristically Lincolnshire. But
then you've got the sheep on the top as well, and I love sheep. Painting sheep is just they're brilliant to paint.
How do you pronounce your surname?
Stefaniuk.
Stefaniuk. Okay.
Yeah, it's Ukrainian. It's my husband's father was a prisoner of war.
Really?
And he worked on a camp out near Digby. They had them all out there doing the agriculture. So then he met my mother-in-law.
And what did your parents do?
My mum was a nurse, but then she was of that generation where once she'd had children, she stopped work and never worked again. And my dad he was originally, when he met her, he was in the RAF, so they met at a dance at Lincoln Co-op. And then he became a Hoover salesman. And so when Hoovers first came out, he used to go around all the houses in Lincolnshire selling Hoovers, and he could tell me a tale about all these various houses that he'd been to.
Which Hoovers they've got.
Which Hoovers they'd got. What a discount he had to give them. And he was Hoover Salesman of the Year in 1950 something.
Right.
And he actually, I used to do, when I was little, I used to do ballet very badly with Janet Revens in a house on Donington Road in a conservatory, and I see the conservatory now and I think that is so small. How on earth did 20 girls fit in there doing ballet? I mean, I know we're only tiny, but we did ballet there, and then she closed, and there was a very, very good ballet teacher, the ballet teacher in Lincoln, called Christine Orange, who had been trained at the Royal Ballet School. And obviously everybody that had been to Janet Revens wanted to go to Christine Orange, and she said, no, I'm not taking anybody. No, you have not been properly taught. No, I'm not taking anybody. And there were no other ballet teachers really, and I was devastated. And Dad said, I sold Christine Orange a Hoover. I'm going to go and see her.
got in.
And he managed to get me in. And I always thought, crikey, he must have been a really good well, I mean, he obviously was a good salesman, but that must have taken some powers of persuasion. And then it was only later on I thought, I bet he told her a real sob story, because actually I was pretty awful at ballet, and I was never going to be any good because I had terrible knock knees, and I even had to wear built-up shoes. And I bet he just told her, there's this poor little girl, and she does struggle with her knock knees, and it would be so good of you if you would take her on.
The sob story.
You
used to enjoy doing that then?
I did. And I used to go. I would probably be about 12, 13, and I used to go on a Thursday night to rehearsals at the back of the Theatre Royal. And I used to leave school and walk up from South Park and walk up the High Street and go to a Chinese restaurant on my own. I think it was somewhere above what's now Binns, or somewhere up there. There was a little Chinese restaurant. I always used to have chop suey, and then walk to the ballet class.
Little memory there.
But I think I knew that I was no good at it, because I used to watch all these other girls and think, but I practice and I still can't bend my knees like that.
Maybe not made to do it.
I think my parents should have maybe told me, you're never going to, because I had all these dreams, going off and being a ballerina.
Well, you've got to encourage your kids, haven't you, I suppose? If they want to do something, I suppose they've got to find that for themselves, really, haven't they?
Well, it was either that or I wanted to be an actress. And there was one point when Mum did say, look, if you want to go to stage school, I'm sure, we could have, and I decided not to.
So you had a lot of different, paths that you could have taken when you were younger then.
And I mean, I suppose in a way, I mean, the ballet I was no good at, but I did enjoy it. Acting, I loved acting. Again, I don't think I was very good. I was just overconfident. I just liked the sound of my own voice. But I never, when I was at infant school, junior school, I was Widow Twankey in the pantomime, and I loved that. But that was embarrassing because I played the cello as well at the time.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to play the overture, but there wasn't time between the overture and the first act to get changed. So I had to come out on the stage in my Widow Twankey costume and play the Scheherazade on the cello. And that was very embarrassing. But I just loved it, and so I sort of got the taste for it. But I don't think I was ever cast in a big part after that.
No, it never went on to be a career.
No. And again, I thought, I've got a real talent here. I could be really good.
Yeah.
But no.
Have you got any hobbies that you still do now then, apart from your painting, or is it takes up the whole thing?
Painting is completely taken. I mean, I still read quite a lot, but not as much as I used to.
Full-time painting.
Well, and crossword. I do like the crossword. I've taught myself to do the Times crossword.
Yeah.
My mum used to do it, and she would never tell me how to do it.
No, I've never tried it, I don't think.
You can learn, and it's actually the clues are so, when you get to know it, the clues are so clever, and sometimes they laugh out loud funny.
Yeah.
The way they've constructed them. But she just, I wonder now, I think maybe it was something, a bit of space in her life that she just wanted for herself. Yeah, and so she wasn't, there was no way she was going to teach me. Because she wanted to just be the one that
leave
could
me alone
do it.
to do it.
Yeah.
On my own, yeah. It's
because
my thing.
Yeah, there are some really easy things that you can tell people. I did think actually once I'd finished teaching, before I got so busy painting, I did think I ought to volunteer to go into schools and run lunchtime clubs, teaching kids how to do cryptic crosswords. Because they're just brilliant and they're so clever, and the kids would have enjoyed constructing their own clues as well. Yeah. And it would have been a way to keep in with teaching a bit as well. But
you ever think about doing it again, or is it sort of...
What, the teaching?
Yeah.
I hung on to all my teaching resources for about, I think probably 4 years after I stopped. And then thought, no.
You had to think about it for a bit.
Yeah, I did think about it, and everybody said, "Oh, you'll miss it terribly," but I really haven't. Even though, I mean, I taught some fantastic kids, absolutely fantastic kids. Kids generally are wonderful, but at Gainsborough, it was the Gainsborough High School, the grammar school.
Queen Elizabeth.
Queen Elizabeth, yeah. The kids were just brilliant, and because I was teaching in the sixth form, it was generally people that had chosen to do it because they wanted to do the subject, and so they were all really interested in it. And so we used to do all sorts of lunchtime clubs. We used to do mock trial competitions where we'd compete in magistrates' courts and crown courts around the country, and it was it was great.
That's the big difference, I suppose, between teaching sixth form and then teaching sort of like I don't know, like the early years in high school. It's different, isn't it? So many kids there who don't want to be.
That's right, or aren't interested in the subject, and why should they be?
I remember having a teacher in like year 9, maybe it was, and didn't really like him that much. And then I had him again in media in sixth form, and I thought, not that keen on this, and I ended up getting on with him really well in that. And it's like, I suppose that maybe was the difference. It's the amount. I remember the class I was in to begin with was like massive, loads of kids in it, and then the media studies class was sort of like 15 people. Yeah, and people who wanted to be there. So it's just completely different.
Yeah, and also you had because I didn't teach lower down the school, I didn't have any baggage, and the students didn't have any baggage. We were new to each other. Yeah. And it made a big difference. And I think as well, I had an unfair advantage over the other teachers in that I hadn't come from a teaching background, and the kids knew that I'd been a solicitor, and so they knew that I knew what I was talking about in that sense.
Hey up, thanks for listening to that one. The reason it sort of stops so abruptly is because my recorder stopped recording after about 55 minutes. So yeah, I plugged it into the wall and didn't turn the switch on, so it was running on battery power. So I missed sort of 20 minutes at the end, which is a bit of a shame, but it is what it is. I usually ask the meaning of life question right at the end, and I think Toni, from memory, she said it's about enjoying yourself, really. But I think she laughed at the answer a little bit, so she wasn't really sure what to say. But yeah, there was a few things, other things that were missed as well, unfortunately. But yeah, I'll try not to do that again. But yeah, thanks very much for listening, and join me again in the next one.